90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to the 35th season of Law You Should Know here on Nassau Community College. And we have a very new topic for today, electric vehicles and the law. And our guest, Enid Jaffe, has studied this issue and is going to tell us about trends, including taxes and legislation, and what she thinks will happen to electric vehicles for civilian and commercial use in the future. Enid, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thank you.
What first got you interested in the idea of electric vehicles?
Well, I was working for a major investor-owned utility in Southern California and was looking for a new job and interviewed with the head of the electrification group and just fell in love with it. My main qualification for the job was that I'd ridden the New York subways as a kid, but I just fell in love with the whole subject area and the new technology.
And electricity has been working well with subways for over 100 years, both here and abroad. But electric vehicles are a new thing. And what gave rise to the birth of electric vehicles?
Yeah. About 1990, the California Air Resources Board passed a regulation called the Zero Emission Vehicle, or ZEV regulation. And basically, their plan was to require that all vehicles be electric by something very ambitious like 1995 or 2000. Well, clearly that technology wasn't ready, but the regulation was technology forcing and caused automakers to really look at the technology and develop it. And now we're actually 25 years later, we're actually at the point 35 years later where the vehicles are ready for prime time and they're on the road.
And what are some of the benefits or drawbacks of electric vehicles compared to traditional gas or diesel vehicles?
Sure. Well, the first thing I want to say is that I have not driven a gasoline car since the year 2000. So clearly I walk the talk. My experience with EVs is they're really fun to drive. They're super quiet. They're very high energy. They have great acceleration. Obviously, they've improved a lot since I first started driving electric in the year 2000. And generally, everyone who gets in one and tries it loves it.
And what about the idea of hybrid vehicles? Will they be around forever, or it's basically to help us transition and introduce us to the benefits of at a lower cost, operating cost at least, of electric vehicles?
Yeah, I think they will be around forever. There is definitely a role for hybrids, and there's a role for pure battery electrics. Not everyone can deal with the range limitations of EVs, and there are still some range limitations, although they're much less now. And for those people who are not comfortable relying strictly on battery power, the hybrids are a great choice. Hybrid vehicles are coming out now that have more and more battery mileage on them. It's called a strong hybrid. So I definitely think it's not just a transition thing. I think there's a role for both types of vehicles.
And the battery is so much more important to the electric vehicle than, let's say, a battery is to a traditional vehicle. What have been some trends with batteries in terms of their size, their weight, their cost, and their reliability? Sure.
Yeah, batteries have really come a long way. When I first started driving electric cars, the range of a battery pack was about 60 miles, if you were lucky. Now I drive a Kia EV6 and I get over 350 miles. So there's been a major improvement and a major cost reduction. Batteries are now just about on parity with our internal combustion engines, and we think that that's going to get even better in the future, where they'll be less costly than internal combustion engines.
And that range of 350 miles or so is a sweet spot because that's about the range of a gas-powered car as well.
Exactly.
And for work, maybe you can get by a week of commuting or you're taking a vacation trip, and 350 miles is a good distance to accomplish in a day.
Right. I drive up to Northern California to see my family, and I stop once to charge my car just to make sure I get there with a full tank. And, and I have a charger at home. There are many public chargers that can be used these days. And I never feel range anxiety.
And what's holding back further growth of electric vehicles now? Is one item availability of chargers, the cost of the vehicles, just overcoming that hurdle and having that electric vehicle experience?
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of factors going on here. First of all, the growth of EVs has been phenomenal, given that this is a brand new technology and that there were hundreds of cars, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and now to have millions of cars, that's a major improvement. And sometimes we look at the short term and say, oh, sales are down this month. But overall, the picture has been a continuous hockey stick of growth. So there's certainly the prices are still higher, and that's why we have a lot of tax credits and incentives to help people buy electric vehicles. The lifetime cost of the car is much lower. And in general, they're a very good deal. And that's something people don't really realize is how economically, in addition to environmentally positive, they are economically very favorable.
And just as in traditional cars, sometimes the availability of lower-end items, lower-end models helps to accelerate sales and to spread the benefit of electric vehicles. So what are some of the trends with that?
Yes. Well, you're seeing automakers come out with more and more models. I think we have something like 60 or 70 models now available. When I first started driving electric, we had 2 models available, or one. I could drive an EV1 or an EV1. And now you have dozens of models. And so they're going up and down the price range. Originally, they were expensive because the batteries are expensive. And now we're seeing prices start to come down. The other thing is that depending on the financing you get, I would say that several of my EVs have been the cheapest cars I have ever owned. What I get in terms of, I go in, I finance the vehicle, I pay a down payment and finance the rest. And my Nissan Leaf I think it was a little over $200 a month. My current car is a little over $300 a month. Compare that to the traditional American car, and it's quite favorable.
And you've mentioned that there have been subsidies and tax incentives, and they have come and gone over the past few years. What type of incentives you think may stimulate growth or may slow growth down?
Right. Well, currently, in 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed. And one of the issues we'd have, you're absolutely right, is one of the problems we had was that incentives would come and go. And at the end of a year, Congress would enact an incentive and make it retroactive. Well, if you hadn't bought the car by then or put the charger in, you were kind of out of luck. But now they are basically in place until 2035, which is fantastic. And they're very generous incentives. So you can get up to $7,500 per vehicle for a new vehicle. It has to have a certain amount of American content, but you can also get $4,000 tax credit for a used vehicle. That's the very first time that's happened. And so that's really promising. And the other thing that's really different and very innovative is the fact that local governments and government agencies can now get the tax credit even though they don't pay taxes. So that was an innovation in the BIL that has been very promising for local fleets to actually make the investment in EVs.
And the tax credit is the same regardless of whether it's a $25,000 vehicle or a $75,000 vehicle?
There's a cap on it. I can't remember the exact caps, but there's definitely a cap because they don't want, people buying electric Hummers, and if they can afford an electric Hummer, they shouldn't be getting the tax credit. but it's a pretty generous cap. The bigger issue is that there's been a lot of back and forth around how much American content is required. And there was some disagreement in Congress and some changes to that. And so the current list, the goal was to incentivize car makers to make the vehicles here. And so that is slowly happening. The list is growing, and if you lease the car, you don't have to actually comply with that. So there's a workaround.
Okay, and I just want to remind our listeners that we're talking with Enid Jaffe. She's an expert on electric vehicles, and we're talking about electric vehicles and the law and different finance and tax issues. So basically, what is the cheapest kind of electric vehicle that someone could get, maybe for a college student or someone starting their first job, versus something that's good for a light trucking or perhaps much more?
I generally recommend the Nissan Leaf. It's a very solid car. I owned one for 3 years, and I tried to give each brand a chance, since I lease a vehicle every 3 years or so. And the Leaf was great. It got really good mileage, and it was very, very inexpensive. You can get different versions of it from lower end to higher end. I'd say in my book, that's probably the best EV.
And do you think there's an advantage to leasing an electric vehicle as opposed to buying? Because this way, in 3 years or so, you'll get the benefit of more technology, and you could still take advantage of the rebates?
Absolutely. I think until this industry is completely mature, leasing is a much better option because, number one, you don't lose out on technology. You don't end up with a car 3, 4, 5 years down the road that's not the state of the art. And so that's really important. Secondly, I want the battery to be the manufacturer's problem, not my problem. Batteries are improving all the time. I've never had a battery go bad, but I don't want that to happen. So I find leasing makes me feel more secure. And I know I can graduate to the next technology, in 3 years.
And also this way, every part of the car, including the battery, is still covered by the guarantee, and it's not your responsibility. And
Correct.
You'll just start fresh in 3 years. And
Correct.
Again, not worry about repairs and get the benefit of the newer technology.
Right. And the way I leased my current car, the Kia EV6, it's a 2-year lease. And then after 2 years, I can buy out the lease. If it keeps performing as it is now, I'm definitely going to do that. I really like the car a lot.
In terms of handling and safety, are the electric vehicles equivalent, or it depends on other technology or the size of the car?
They're safer. They are much safer. First of all, we never think about it every day, but an internal combustion engine is kind of like driving on a bomb. You have a constant, fire going in your engine. That's what combustion is. And it can explode. It can blow up. It can have a fire. Batteries are sealed. And the worst thing that's going to happen to a battery is if there's an impact, it's going to leak on the bottom. They're sealed inside the car, and there's very, very little danger. You do need to train the public safety personnel to treat a battery fire in the proper way, as opposed to how they would treat an internal combustion fire. But they're really safe. So I feel like that's a no-brainer. I'd much rather be driving on a sealed, solid state battery that is like a gel form, is not liquid, than a gasoline tank and an internal combustion engine.
And if there are problems with an electric vehicle, is it usually a result of a manufacturing defect or a pothole, or what are the sources of problems, and how likely is it?
Yeah. They're incredibly problem-free, because the first thing is they have far fewer moving parts. There's no carburetor. There's no engine. There's no radiator. You basically have the batteries, an electric motor, the transmission, which is basically drive and reverse and neutral. And so there aren't a lot of things to go wrong. And all the time I've had EVs, and this is going back 25 years now, I've replaced the windshield wipers, occasionally the brakes, and tires.
And can your regular mechanic fix an EV, or should you go to the car dealer?
Well, right now, no. The regular mechanic cannot, because it's essentially a computer on wheels. And we do need more trained mechanics and more like a traditional maintenance, programs where you don't have to go to the dealer for everything. Because even the dealers sometimes have to bring in, they used to call them the flying doctors, to diagnose problems with EVs because they required a specialist. So I'd say that is something that's growing in the industry, but in general, they have very few issues.
And does an EV require any regular maintenance? Like a regular car might get an oil change or have their brakes checked?
Nope. And even when something happens that, for example, that they needed to upgrade something, let's say there's a glitch, they do it over the air in the software. So you rarely do you have to go in and actually go for a physical inspection of the car. I mean, of course, you got to maintain brakes and tires and so on, but in general, they can do over the air upgrades.
And if you buy an electric vehicle, are you supporting American jobs and American companies, or you're helping foreigners? Is it helping the American economy, or are the American car makers stepping up their production or foreign manufacturers in the U.S. stepping up their production of electric vehicles?
Well, that's the beauty of the legislation that was passed in 2021. It was really focused on Buy American, Build American. The goal was to create U.S. jobs, to revitalize U.S. manufacturing, and to be, again, technology forcing, just like that original 1990 regulation was. That is we weren't quite ready for that, so they actually delayed some of the implementation, but the goal remains the same. We want to build those cars in America. We want the technology to come from here, and we're rewarding that with the tax credits.
And how is development and growth of electric vehicles impacting buses, impacting cargo and tractor trailers, and even local deliveries, say for UPS or Federal Express or the post office?
Right. Well, I don't know about where you are, but where I am, I actually see battery-powered Amazon trucks and battery-powered UPS trucks now, which is pretty exciting. Those companies have made a major commitment. In California, where I am, all buses need to be electric by, I think, 2030 or maybe even sooner. So there's been a big push on that. They just adopted a program that requires all freight vehicles to be electric by 2035. Again, the technology is there. It's developing. The battery costs are coming down, and is there still a constraint in the supply chain? Yes, we're not 100% there yet. But I'd say in general, we will be able to meet the requirements of these regulations, and it's great for the air quality.
And when you say supply chain, you mean the availability of these vehicles?
Availability of components, batteries, we're building large battery plants. I'd say generally, putting the trucks, for example, are out there now, but they're out there in very small numbers, and they're being tested and revised and et cetera. And so that's what I mean is that, we're in the hundreds, not the thousands.
And once that happens, the cost of operating those trucks will be similar?
Much less.
And of course, there won't be pollution and things that are negative for the environment.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, at one point, the prices vary, but at one point I was able to truthfully say that it cost me 25% to drive an electric car of what I would pay for gasoline for a gas car. I think that's crept up a little. So it's probably more like 35 to 50%, but still it's a major reduction in cost.
And is that because of the charging stations or other costs of ownership?
Electricity is cheaper. Okay. And as I said, there's no moving parts. There's very little maintenance. There's absolutely no reason for these vehicles. Electric motors have been around forever, and they're very reliable.
And do some employers or, say, railroad stations or supermarkets offer free charging?
Yes. There's a whole movement around for example, some of the food chains. They're doing refrigerated trucks and electric refrigerated and electric trucks. and they're offering depot charging. That's already happening with some of the large truck rental agencies where they are actually installing chargers in the yards. There's a big push among the ports to put in charging for the vehicles that come and go from the ports. And pretty soon you won't be able to drive a gasoline or diesel truck onto a port property. So yes, there is a lot of that happening, but a lot more to come.
I'd like to remind our listeners, you're listening to Law You Should Know on WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College at 90.3 FM. And Law You Should Know is celebrating its 35th anniversary. If you missed any portion of our program today about electric vehicles and the law and what the trends will be, just go to the website at nccradio.org. And we're talking with Enid Jaffe, and she's an expert about electric vehicles and their history. And Enid, what is going to be some of the trends in the next 5 or 10 years concerning electric vehicles?
Well, I think we're going to see prices come down. I think we're going to see the number of models increase. Because car makers, can't turn on a dime. They make their plans 5-7 years out. So, what we see coming is an increasing diversity of models and options for people that will basically replicate what we see now in gasoline cars. And as there's more mass market, the prices will come down. And I think we're going to this is for the next generation. Most kids, even years ago, a kid could identify a Tesla faster than an adult. So I think our children are all going to be driving electric cars. That's their expectation. That's part of what I see.
And I guess the new thing is finding those Tesla trucks on the road.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can love them or hate them.
But in terms of cost and operation, are they as efficient as electric cars? Yes, they are. I think the jury's still out about whether you can have fully electric Class A trucks. It might need to be, for example, hydrogen is also considered zero emission. And for long haul trucks, it may be more efficient to have a hydrogen fuel cell or liquid hydrogen fueling or hydrogen producing the electricity. There are many options there. So some of that is still in the experimental stage because you have to balance the weight of the batteries against the mileage and the efficiency. And that's for the long distance trucks, but for the local delivery trucks,
short haul, absolutely,
and especially that will reduce pollution near our cities.
Right. There's so many applications that are wonderful. So delivery trucks. How many Amazon trucks do we see in a day? They are all going electric. Garbage trucks. Wouldn't it be nice not to hear the garbage truck in the middle of the night? I used to live in New York City and would wake me up at 3:00 in the morning. There's a lot of benefits. In addition to the air quality, there's a lot of noise pollution reduction benefits. So we're going to see a lot of that happening too. And it's going to get to the point, school buses. I should mention school buses. Really nice to not have our children breathing diesel when they walk around the back of the school bus. So lots of benefits for the community.
And what about the future of charging stations? They've evolved over the last few years. And what do you think future trends will be?
They're going to get bigger and bigger. I can tell you that. When I was starting out, a 3 kilowatt charging station was the norm. Then it was 7 kilowatts. Now you can go up to 350 kilowatts. And pretty soon we're going to have, we already have the first, but you'll have more common megawatt stations, which will be for those long haul trucks. So they are going to get bigger and faster. There are certainly some issues we're going to have to solve about, whether we have enough electricity, whether we have to have, more renewable energy, more efficient use of the electricity. We can't just keep growing and growing, but in general, yes, we're going to have more of them. And they're going to be bigger.
And really, wherever you park a car, whether it's home or the supermarket or the railroad station or a garage near your work or wherever you're going, that could become the charging station.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it is like, I'm home, I get home, I plug in, and my car is full when I leave in the morning. And if you live in a multi-family apartment house, it gets a little more complicated, but we're working on solutions for that. You either use public charging or you use charging, that is assigned to you, or that's guest parking and assigned to everyone. So we're working on all the solutions. But again, you don't have to go to a gas station. It's going to be right convenient to you.
And are there any websites with further information about electric vehicles, how they operate, the history of them, or tax issues?
Sure. I recommend the alternative fuel, what's it called? Alternative.
Or just some words we can Google.
Yeah, data center. It's a federal site. It's called afdc.gov. Excellent resource for all kinds of information, what cars are the cleanest, what everything costs, charging infrastructure, all very unbiased information.
And are there any political issues that everyone feels it's a good idea and that you save pollution and you're saving in your wallet?
Well, is there any issue that's not political these days? So, sure, there are political issues, but and some people are more favorable to EVs, than others. But it's a couple of things. Electricity is a domestic fuel. It's usually made from natural gas or renewable sources. It's all domestic. So that's really important. The other thing is that the EV industry has been on a steady curve upward since 1990 and accelerating over the last 5 to 10 years. And that has been through every kind of political administration or, political current. So it's going to stay that way.
I would like to thank our guest, Enid Jaffe, for her insight concerning electric vehicles and the law. And there are many issues to consider. Again, you can tell someone about the podcast or listen to the program again at nccradio.org. And thank you for joining Law You Should Know during our 35th anniversary season. And please join us again next week at 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York.